Welcome back to Sleepy Science History. I'm so glad you're here again. Tonight, or perhaps it's morning where you are, let's lean back, let the thoughts drift like gentle clouds, and ask a question that sounds simple at first, yet opens into vast oceans of wonder. What if humans never needed sleep? It almost feels like a forbidden thought, doesn't it? The kind of idea you whisper to yourself when you're lying awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wishing you could just keep going without the heaviness in your eyes. Imagine never closing them, never drifting away, never surrendering a single hour to dreams or darkness. Me, all of us, awake forever. What would that world look like? You might already feel your mind pulling in two directions. One side whispers, "Oh, think of all the time we'd gain, the books we'd read, the art we'd create, the conversations that could stretch on endlessly." The other side shivers a little and says, "But wait, without rest, wouldn't we crumble?" It's a riddle, and tonight, together, we'll wander slowly into it. Take a breath. There's no rush. I wonder sometimes, has sleep always been seen as a thief of time? Even in ancient writings, people spoke of it with mixed feelings. The Greek poet Homer called sleep the brother of death, a shadowy twin. The Romans imagined sleep as a god with wings of dreams, whispering illusions into the ears of mortals. And maybe you've had nights where it felt like that, like you lost hours to something you didn't fully choose. Doesn't it feel strange, almost unfair, that 1/3 of a human life is spent unconscious? But then again, is it really wasted? Or is it, perhaps, a secret gift? If you close your eyes right now, maybe you'd see colors swirling, or fragments of memory rearranging themselves into odd shapes. That's the language of sleep, the hidden workshop where the brain tinkers quietly. Still, let's keep playing with the what if. Let's imagine an Earth where humans never required it at all. 24 waking hours, every single day. No beds, no pillows, no yawns. No dawns spent groggy, no evenings spent yearning for rest. Just a seamless river of wakefulness. Can you picture it? Cities never dimming their lights, shops open at all hours, painters leaning over canvases through what would once have been night, children running down streets under midnight stars with the same bright energy they had at noon. A symphony of constant motion. Would it be beautiful or terrifying? I find myself smiling at the thought of history rewritten. If humans never slept, perhaps our ancestors would have built twice as much, twice as fast. Civilizations might have stretched their monuments higher, their ships farther. Imagine pyramids rising not after decades of toil, but after half the time because the workers never needed to stop. Imagine explorers charting oceans without pause, philosophers debating endlessly under oil lamps, inventions springing up twice as quickly. Would we already be colonizing Mars? Or living in cities under the sea? But then there's that other side of the question. Would speed mean wisdom? Or would it simply mean mistakes made more quickly, errors multiplied, conflicts never interrupted by the cooling balm of sleep? After all, even arguments need to rest. Even wars, as awful as they are, sometimes halt in the night. What if without sleep, the fury never cooled, the tempers never softened? I can't help but wonder, do we owe some of our kindness to the fact that sleep interrupts us? You know the feeling, you wake up after anger, and it seems lighter, the sharpness dulls. Maybe sleep isn't just rest, but nature's reset button. Now let's pull closer, you and I, and think about the body itself. Our cells, our organs, our bones, would they keep working forever if we never gave them the nightly pause? The truth is, scientists have learned that sleep is more than just switching off. It's like a housekeeping shift in a busy hotel. During the day, the guests, our thoughts, our movements, our worries, scatter crumbs and clutter everywhere. At night, while we dream, the staff comes in, sweeping, mopping, restoring order. Proteins are cleared, memories are filed, little repairs are made. If we never needed sleep, would the body still perform this cleaning while we're awake? Or would we carry the dust of our days forever, slowly fogging the windows of our minds? Perhaps evolution, in this alternate world, would have given us some other mechanism, some secret rhythm to heal while standing, walking, speaking. Maybe our hearts would hum with a nightly tune that scrubs us clean even as we go about our endless hours. And yet, it's so hard to picture, isn't it? Because deep down, our experience tells us that without sleep, we unravel. The long night shifts, the college cramming sessions, the newborn baby keeping parents awake. They remind us how fragile we are without it. After one sleepless night, you feel frayed. After two, you begin to stumble. After three, reality itself begins to ripple. Would evolution really erase all that just for more waking hours? Here's a quieter thought. Maybe it isn't about what we'd do with more time, but what we'd lose. Dreams. Those strange, slippery stories that flicker in our minds when logic takes a nap. If we never needed sleep, would there be no dreaming at all? No flying over landscapes, no reunions with lost loved ones, no absurd adventures with shifting scenery. Would poetry itself have vanished without dreams to inspire it? Think of Mary Shelley dreaming Frankenstein into existence, or Paul McCartney waking with the melody of yesterday already in his head. Dreaming has whispered so many gifts to humanity. What art would be missing if we had never closed our eyes? And you, listening now, what dreams of yours would you miss most? The cozy ones where you drift into impossible houses with endless rooms? Or the surreal ones that leave you puzzled for days? Perhaps even the nightmares, in their strange way, teach us something about fear, about survival, about shadow. Without them, would we know ourselves less deeply? I sometimes imagine walking through a city in this sleepless world. It's 3 a.m, but no one yawns. Cafes hum with chatter. Parks echo with laughter. Factories and libraries both filled with tireless workers. But look closer. Would the faces shine with creativity, or would they carry a certain emptiness? The emptiness of a species that has lost its secret retreat? Would we be more productive, yet somehow less human? Could it be that sleep is not a weakness at all, but the very thing that balances us? That nature, in its quiet wisdom, gifted us this rhythm so we would not burn too brightly, too quickly? Here's a playful picture. Imagine if trees never shed their leaves, if they just kept growing without pause. Would they tower higher? Yes. But would the soil beneath them dry out, starved of nutrients? Would the branches snap under their own weight? Maybe humans without sleep would be like that, giants of activity but fragile at the roots. And yet, the temptation remains. Science even now flirts with the idea. What if technology could let us erase sleep? Pills, implants, machines to refresh the brain in minutes rather than hours. Some experiments already hint at it. But if that day comes, will we embrace it? Or will we hesitate, remembering the ancient comfort of closing our eyes and drifting? I think about it sometimes when I can't fall asleep. I lie there, restless, wishing I didn't need it at all. But then, when the dreams finally arrive, I remember why they matter. It's like stepping into another universe each night, a hidden life running parallel to this one. Would I really give that up, even for twice the time awake? Maybe the question isn't what if we never needed sleep, but what if we stopped thinking of sleep as wasted? So, dear listener, let's leave the question open. Could a sleepless world be more advanced, more efficient, more dazzling? Perhaps. But would it be kinder? Would it be wiser? Would it be human? For now, perhaps it's enough to rest in the mystery, to close your eyes tonight with gratitude, knowing that while you drift away, your mind is working quietly, stitching memories, cleaning dust, crafting dreams. Sleep not as a thief but as a secret ally. And maybe tomorrow, when you wake, you'll wonder again, what if humans never needed it? And maybe, just maybe, you'll be glad that we do. What would a clock mean in a world without sleep? Would time itself feel different if hours were never divided between waking and resting? Perhaps the rhythm of life, the steady inhale and exhale of day and night, would lose its shape. If the body never longed for rest, would sunrise and sunset still carry meaning? Or would they become just colors in the sky, admired for beauty but no longer signals to pause, to rise, to dream? Think of how much of human culture is built on the idea of sleep. The lullaby whispered to a child, the glow of lamplight on a bedside table. The very word bedtime carries a softness, a reassurance that the world allows us to let go. Without it, would our languages lose entire constellations of words? Would poetry no longer know the hush of night, the sweetness of slumber, the ache of insomnia? Imagine the first humans in this sleepless history. In caves, around fires, under starlit skies, they would never curl up to drift away. Fire might have been less essential, not as a guard for sleeping bodies, but merely as warmth and light. Storytelling, which so often filled the long hours before rest, might have taken on a different weight. Would myths be told at all if no one was ever waiting for dreams to take them? Or would people simply keep working, keep crafting tools, keep watching the stars until the next task called? And what of the stars? If sleep did not pull us indoors, how many more generations would have gazed longer, deeper into the cosmos? Perhaps astronomy would have blossomed earlier, humans charting constellations with endless patience, naming not just the brightest figures but every tiny spark. Maybe we would know more of the universe by now because we never stopped looking up. But then again, would we notice beauty in the same way if life were one long, continuous stretch? Isn't part of beauty born from contrast? The quiet after noise, the stillness after movement, the darkness after light? Without the cycle of wake and sleep, perhaps everything would blur into sameness, like a painting left too long in the sun, its colors fading together. Could it be that sleep is not only rest, but also the frame around the artwork of our days? And if you never had to close your eyes, would you still dream with them open? Could imagination survive without the theater of the night? It's curious to think. Maybe in such a world, humans would invent something else to replace dreaming. A ritual, a trance, a deliberate wandering of the mind. We might have temples of imagination, where people sit for hours, eyes open, yet drifting inward. Could daydreams become the sacred substitute? I sometimes wonder how love would look in this sleepless existence. So much romance seems tied to nighttime. The starlit walks, the whispers before falling asleep, the comfort of sharing a bed. If no one ever grew drowsy, if no one ever drifted into slumber beside another, would intimacy take on a different shape? Perhaps lovers would share endless conversations instead. Their bond formed not in the quiet surrender of rest, but in the ceaseless exchange of thought. Would that be deeper, or would it lack the softness that sleep brings? And what of childhood? Picture children who never grow cranky from fatigue, never collapse into naps, never fight against bedtime. Parents would never rock a baby to sleep, never hush them in the dark, never read them just one more story beneath the covers. Would something precious vanish from family life, some small sweetness of care? Or would children simply learn other rituals of comfort, new ways of being held and calmed? Even the economy of the world would be unrecognizable. Entire industries exist because humans sleep, mattresses, blankets, alarm clocks, pajamas. Without them, billions of objects vanish from history. And with those hours reclaimed, the labor force would double overnight. More workers, more thinkers, more creators. Would that mean prosperity? Or would it mean endless competition? A world spinning faster and faster, leaving little space for gentleness? There is also the question of silence. The night, as it exists now, is a kind of pause, a hush that falls over cities, even the busiest ones, as most people retreat to rest. If no one needed sleep, would silence vanish entirely? Would every hour be filled with the hum of engines, the chatter of voices, the clatter of progress? And if so, would humans begin to crave silence as much as they now crave rest? Would we build new sanctuaries, not for sleep, but for stillness? Think of religion and ritual. How many prayers are whispered before bed? How many meditations practiced in the quiet before sleep? If the human body never slowed, never grew heavy-eyed, how might spirituality have taken shape instead? Perhaps entire faiths would have grown around the question of whether wakefulness should ever end. Perhaps death itself would feel stranger, because humans would never have known the small rehearsal of it each night. Without sleep, would mortality seem more shocking, more unbearable? Or would life feel endlessly full, unbroken by hours of unconsciousness, and therefore death less of a thief? Science, too, might wear a different face. So many of our discoveries about biology, psychology, and medicine come from studying sleep. The dream laboratories, the sleep clinics, the countless studies of REM cycles, all of them would never exist. Would we understand memory as deeply? Would we know how the brain heals? Or would we lack entire branches of science, never guessing what we had missed, because the need for sleep never pressed the questions upon us? And yet, the strangest thought is this: would art exist in the same way? So much art feels like a dream turned outward. Paintings, music, literature. They carry the texture of something half-remembered, something glimpsed behind closed eyes. Without sleep, without dreams, would art become more logical, more straightforward, less surreal? Would we trade away the strangeness that makes art so mysterious, so human? Or perhaps, deprived of nightly visions, we would chase imagination even harder, inventing new ways to dream while awake. There is, too, the matter of aging. Our bodies now depend on sleep to repair themselves, to slow the wear and tear of living. If evolution had granted us eternal wakefulness, what mechanism would take its place? Would we live longer because our bodies heal constantly as we move? Or would we burn out faster, the absence of sleep leading to a shorter but busier life? Could it be that sleep is not a thief at all, but a negotiator exchanging hours of unconsciousness for years of longer living? And I can't help but ask, if humans never needed sleep, would we still dream of it anyway? Would stories be told of imagined people who closed their eyes, surrendered to stillness, and woke refreshed? Would sleep become a myth, a fantasy, a lost paradise whispered about in legends? Perhaps poets in that world would write of sleep the way we now write of immortality, longing for it, aching for its mystery, even though they have never known it. In this alternate timeline, maybe there would be festivals of darkness, where people gather to mimic what they have never experienced. They might lie down in silence, eyes closed, pretending to enter the land of dreams. Artists might paint visions of what sleep could be. Musicians might compose symphonies of imagined slumber. Sleep, in such a world, would not be routine, it would be art, aspiration, myth. And doesn't that make you pause? To realize that what we sometimes resent, the lost hours, the grogginess, the surrender, is, in truth, a wonder we barely appreciate? That sleep is not just a biological necessity but a profound cultural thread, weaving through every part of who we are. So I leave the question open, as always. Would we gain more than we lose if we never needed sleep? Or is it precisely in losing those hours each day that we become fully human? What would night itself mean if no one ever needed to rest? Would darkness still feel like a pause? Or would it simply be another shade of daylight, a softer version of time with no special purpose? Right now, night invites stillness. It draws curtains across the stage of the day, whispers to the body that it is safe to stop. Without sleep, would the night lose that invitation? Would it be stripped of mystery, reduced to nothing more than a dimmer switch on the sun's absence? If people never closed their eyes, would we light the night differently? Today, street lamps scatter their glow across sidewalks, neon hums over diners, headlights cut ribbons through highways. But these are interruptions, placeholders until morning returns. Imagine instead a world where night is fully claimed, owned by wakeful humanity. Would cities blaze brighter, lit as fiercely at midnight as at noon? Or would we learn to see in the dark, evolving eyes that drink in starlight without fear? Would electric bulbs ever be invented if our eyes adjusted so well? And how would the stars feel to us? As it is, the stars belong mostly to the sleepless, to the wanderers, to the insomniacs. They are a private show, a quiet secret given to those awake when others rest. But if no one slept, the stars would be shared by all. Would that make them less magical or more? Would constellations become part of daily conversation? Like weather? Would children point upward at midnight as casually as they point at clouds during the day? Or would familiarity dull them, and we'd stop looking up altogether? Consider too the moon. For centuries it has been a companion of sleepers, a guardian of dreams, a symbol of rest. Poets have written of its glow over quiet fields, of lovers beneath its silver gaze, of night travelers guided by its pull. But in a world without sleep, would the moon still be tender? Or would it be practical, A reliable clock, a steady light for endless activity? Would it lose its romance, its softness, its mystery, becoming nothing more than another sun at half strength? Then again, maybe the opposite would happen. Maybe we would worship the moon even more, because it would be the only thing to remind us of what we no longer had. Stillness, pause, surrender. Perhaps the moon would come to represent the sleep we never knew. Maybe temples would rise, not to gods of war or harvest, but to the goddess of slumber, imagined but unreachable. But let's wander a little further. How would animals fit into this sleepless human world? Because they would still need rest. Birds would still tuck their heads beneath wings. Cats would curl into warm circles. Lions would sprawl in the shade. Imagine humans awake at all hours, watching this rhythm of animal sleep with curiosity. Would we envy them? Would we pity them? Would we study them more closely, wondering why nature left us out of that nightly ritual? Could create a strange divide. Perhaps humans would feel separate from the rest of life, alien in our endless wakefulness. Or perhaps we would learn gentleness by watching. Imagine a parent telling a child, "Look, the deer sleep in the meadow. Let's walk quietly so they can dream." Even if we never slept ourselves, would we still honor the sleep of other beings? And what of predators? If humans never needed to rest, would we have escaped more dangers? Think of early humans on the savannah. Lions hunt most effectively at night. Wolves stalk in darkness. But if we were always awake, always alert, maybe fewer of us would have fallen. Tribes could keep fires burning constantly. Guards never weary. Hunters always ready. Would evolution have shifted more in our favor, making us the masters of night far earlier than history records? Then again, predators also rest. They slow down, they retreat. And perhaps that balance is part of what kept ecosystems whole. If humans never stopped moving, never paused, would we have consumed too much too quickly, hunting more than needed, gathering more than could be spared? Could endless wakefulness have tilted the scales of survival too far, reshaping nature itself? Think of farming. Even now, agriculture bends around the cycle of day and night. Farmers rise with the sun, rest at dusk. Crops are tended in daylight, animals fed, fields watered. But in a sleepless world, would farms have become vast engines of constant activity? Fields worked in shifts, harvests gathered without pause, irrigation running endlessly. Would abundance overflow? Or would the soil be exhausted faster, never given its season of stillness, its winter pause? Perhaps the earth itself needs something like sleep, and we might have ignored that truth if we did not know it in our own bodies. And what about the seasons? Without sleep to mark our smaller cycles, would we have paid more attention to the larger ones? Would humans see autumn and winter not as times to rest, but simply as times to work under colder skies? Would celebrations like harvest festivals or winter solstices have held the same meaning if no one felt the pull of hibernation in their bones? I keep circling back to the thought of silence. Right now, night is when the world quiets. Not completely, of course. Cities still buzz, crickets still sing. But there is a softness that falls when most humans turn away. If that softness never came, would we learn to invent our own versions of silence? Maybe entire societies would create rest hours not for sleep, but for peace. Bells might ring at midnight, not to end the day, but to begin a ritual of stillness, when all voices hush and streets empty, not because we must, but because we choose to. Would silence become more sacred than sleep ever was? And here's another thought. How would crime change? Darkness now offers cover for thieves, for secretive acts. But much of that relies on others sleeping unaware. In a sleepless world, no one would ever be truly unobserved. There would always be eyes watching, footsteps echoing, guards awake. Would crime decrease simply because secrecy would be harder? Or would it adapt, finding new shadows in a world that never blinks? Picture the arts again, not just dreams inspiring them, but the very structure of creativity. Writers often speak of ideas arriving in the middle of the night, when the world is hushed. Painters talk of inspiration during twilight hours. Musicians write lullabies, symphonies of night. If no one slept, what would replace this? Would artists find inspiration in the rhythm of constant motion, in the endless hum of life? Would lullabies vanish, replaced by songs of vigilance and energy? Would novels explore not the borderlands of dreams, but the vast plains of wakefulness? And then there is love once more because it keeps returning to the center. Without sleep, there would be no moments of drifting off in each other's arms, no lazy mornings stretching between drowsy smiles. But perhaps love would find other shapes. Lovers might watch every sunrise together, not because they woke, but because they never stopped watching. They might hold endless conversations under the stars, their intimacy measured not by rest shared, but by hours unbroken. Could this make love deeper, or would it steal some softness, some vulnerability found only in surrender? Even loneliness would change. Now, much of loneliness comes at night, when others sleep and silence grows heavy. If no one ever slept, would loneliness feel lighter? You would never be the only one awake, never alone in darkness. But would that constant company dull our sense of connection? If everyone is always there, always available, does anyone feel truly special? Could sleeplessness make us lonelier, paradoxically, because togetherness would never pause enough to be missed? I wonder about memory too. Sleep, as we know it, helps weave memories into something lasting. Without it, how would we remember? Would our minds become like rooms cluttered with too many objects? No one sweeping, no one sorting? Or would evolution gift us a new way to organize, a kind of waking dream, a daily hour when thoughts rearrange themselves even as we keep moving? And if so, what would that hour look like? Would we feel it? Would we call it something else, not sleep but drift, not slumber but pause? Perhaps that is the heart of the question. Even if we never needed sleep, would we still crave pause? Would we still invent it because life without rhythm feels flat, endless, unshaped? Maybe we would have created rituals of stillness, hours of lying quietly in dark rooms, not to rest the body, but to rest the soul. Maybe, even without sleep, humans would have invented it anyway, out of longing. And doesn't that possibility make you wonder if sleep is less about biology than about being human? That even in a world where it wasn't required, we might have sought it, carved it into existence, dreamed it into being? What would happen inside the human mind if there were no need for sleep? Would thoughts flow endlessly, like rivers that never reach the sea, or would they tangle into knots, never granted the space to unravel? Right now, sleep acts as a hidden gardener, trimming, pruning, watering the soil of the brain. Without it, would our thoughts grow wild, like vines choking their own roots? Imagine a conversation with yourself that never pauses. Your inner voice, always awake, whispering questions, replaying memories, making lists. Would you learn to quiet it without the natural hush of sleep? Or would humanity become a chorus of restless minds, each carrying an endless monologue, never muted, never softened? How long before clarity gave way to noise? And what of imagination? Dreams, though strange, act like lanterns carried through the dark, lighting corners of the mind untouched by daylight. Without them, where would creativity live? Would it burst forth from constant wakefulness, fueled by unbroken hours of making and building? Or would it fade, starved of that nightly theater where symbols and stories take shape? Could music still surprise us? Could paintings still carry the surreal shimmer of dreams? Think of memory again, that delicate archive of who we are. Sleep now gathers scattered notes of the day and binds them into songs we can recall. Without it, would memory become fragmented, like papers scattered in the wind? Would we live always in the present, each moment vivid but untethered, forgotten as soon as it passed? Or would evolution have given us new tools, perhaps waking rituals of reflection, communal hours where people repeat stories until they sink deep into the mind? Could conversation itself replace dreaming as the keeper of memory? And how would emotion change? You know the feeling. After a long night's rest, sadness feels lighter, anger dulls, joy brightens, sleep softens edges. Without it, would we become sharper, more brittle, our emotions unpolished and raw? Would societies fracture under the weight of constant intensity? Every disagreement stretched without pause, every grief carried without release? Or might we learn new ways to soothe ourselves, new rhythms of peace woven into waking life? Perhaps there would be rituals of stillness, hours set aside not for sleep but for quiet, people lying in darkness, not unconscious, but choosing calm, breathing slowly, letting the mind settle. Could meditation become not a practice for the few, but a necessity for all, replacing the nightly descent into dreams? Would the entire species become monks of wakefulness, each learning to carve islands of silence in seas of endless activity? Then there is the matter of madness. Today, even a few nights without rest can bend reality. The mind begins to hallucinate, to slip. If humans never needed sleep, would those dangers vanish entirely? Or would the absence of dreams, those nightly rehearsals of reality, leave us vulnerable to confusion anyway? Could our species become more brilliant but also more fragile, like glass that shines but shatters at a touch? Think of fear. Nightmares often frighten us, yes, but they also prepare us. They rehearse danger in safe spaces, let us practice survival without real harm. Without them, would fear lose its teacher? Would we become reckless, unprepared for danger? Or perhaps we would be less haunted, freed from visions that never really threatened us. Could a world without nightmares also be a world with less terror? And what of hope? Dreams often carry symbols of longing, glimpses of futures not yet real. Without them, would hope feel thinner? Or would we dream while awake, inventing myths and stories to take the place of nightly visions? Could humanity's longing survive without its nightly practice ground? I wonder too about childhood. How would a child learn to process the flood of new experiences if there were no dreams to help sort them? Would stories become more important, parents retelling lessons and memories again and again to carve them deep into a child's mind? Would lullabies disappear, or would they transform into songs of rest without sleep? Melodies meant not to close the eyes, but to quiet the spirit? In adulthood, what would stress feel like if never softened by slumber? Imagine carrying the weight of a bad day into another, and another without pause. Could we survive such accumulation? Or would humanity invent artificial pauses, festivals, retreats, long hours of ritual silence, so that burdens could be set down in other ways? Would religion itself become the substitute, offering sacred moments of rest for minds that never shut off? Then there is love once again. Sleep now provides intimacy, the tender act of resting beside someone, of being unguarded, vulnerable. If no one slept, would intimacy change? Would it be found instead in shared silences, in mutual moments of turning inward even while awake? Would partners create their own dream hours, lying quietly together, eyes open, imagining aloud? Could that vulnerability replace the trust of slumber? And how would grief feel? Dreams sometimes bring back the lost, offering fleeting reunions. Without sleep, without dreams, would grief be sharper, final, unsoftened by illusions of return? Or would humans create waking rituals to visit the dead, stories and visions told together until the ache lessens? Could imagination carry the same balm as dreams? Or would mourning become more unbearable? It's also worth asking, would the restless human mind invent substitutes for sleep even if not required? Might we design machines to mimic dreaming, to simulate visions and memories? Would virtual worlds arise not for entertainment, but to provide what nature withheld? Could humanity plug into artificial dreams, craving what evolution denied us? Perhaps this is the paradox. Even if we never needed sleep, perhaps we would still seek it. Not in beds, not in unconsciousness, but in the forms of pause, silence, vision. Maybe sleep is not only biological but existential, a shape the soul requires. If not given, we might carve it out ourselves, building it from imagination, ritual, and technology. And if that's true, then endless wakefulness might not free us at all. It might only make us more aware of what we lost, more desperate to recreate it. Like fish longing for wings, like birds dreaming of the sea, we might spend eternity inventing what our bodies never demanded. The hush, the drift, the dream. So what would the mind become in this sleepless existence? A sharper tool? A brighter flame? Or a restless creature, forever seeking a rest it never knew? Perhaps the answer lies not in biology, but in longing. Perhaps even in endless wakefulness, humans would still chase the shape of dreams. What shape would society take if no one ever needed sleep? Would our cities swell into towering labyrinths of constant motion, or would they spread out in quieter balance, filling every hour with a gentler rhythm? Today, life is divided by sleep. Schools begin in the morning, markets close at night, festivals glow in the evening before rest. Without that division, would society still carry a sense of rhythm, or would time flatten into an endless stretch of activity, without beginning or end? Think first of education. Children now study in the daylight and return home in the afternoon, their minds growing weary, their bodies ready for rest. But in a sleepless world, what would school look like? Would classes run around the clock, students divided into shifts, some learning history under moonlight, others solving equations at dawn? Would knowledge double in speed, generations advancing twice as quickly through the halls of learning? Or would the lack of pause overwhelm young minds, flooding them with more lessons than reflection could handle? Would wisdom grow, or only information? And what of work? Offices now open and close, factories buzz and then fall silent, markets thrive in the day and hush at night. But if there were no sleep, would work ever truly stop? Would humans labor in endless shifts, industries producing twice as much, economies booming with constant motion? Or would exhaustion of another kind set in, not physical but spiritual? Could a species with no natural pause invent its own, demanding breaks not for the body but for the soul? Imagine laws written for a sleepless society. Today, labor laws protect hours of rest, weekends, holidays. But in this other world, what would justice look like? Would there be rules against working 24 hours without pause, even if sleep was unnecessary? Would governments create quiet hours for reflection, not because biology required it, but because society feared the chaos of constant activity? Could laws themselves act as a kind of artificial sleep, a structure that reminds people to stop? And religion, how would faith be shaped without sleep? So many spiritual practices bloom in the twilight. Prayers whispered before bed, meditations at dawn, rituals tied to the cycle of waking and resting. Without that cycle, would belief take on new forms? Would gods be worshipped as keepers of rhythm, protectors of silence, inventors of pause? Would temples ring bells not for prayer, but for stillness, moments when society agrees to hush? Could an entire faith grow around the longing for dreams never given? Festivals would change too. Today, holidays often stretch late into the night, firework displays, lantern parades, midnight songs. Their joy comes in part from the breaking of pattern, from staying awake when usually one would rest. But in a world where no one ever sleeps, what thrill would midnight hold? Would celebrations lose their sparkle, becoming only more hours in a long river of time? Or would festivals shift toward other contrasts? Periods of silence, fasting from work, intentional pauses to mimic what sleep once offered? Would people gather not to wake, but to rest in togetherness, even without unconsciousness? And families, how would they change? Parents now tuck children into bed, reading stories, whispering goodnight. Without sleep, what would take its place? Would families invent new rituals, gathering at certain hours not for bedtime, but for connection? Perhaps each household would create its own rhythm. Shared meals at midnight, stories told at dawn, walks taken in the hours when the sky glows silver. Would families grow closer, filling all hours with shared time? Or would they drift apart, each member scattering through endless days, rarely pausing in the same moment? Think of love again in this social lens. Dating now often carries the romance of night. Dinners under stars, confessions whispered before sleep, the intimacy of falling asleep beside another. Without that, what would love look like? Would it thrive in constant wakefulness, lovers speaking endlessly, their time doubled, their conversations unbroken? Or would something tender be lost, the vulnerability of drifting, the sweetness of shared slumber? Could love survive without its nighttime rituals, or would humanity invent substitutes? Silent hours spent side by side, mimicking the trust of sleep even if never required? And friendship, would it deepen or dilute? Now, friends sometimes gather at night, talking until fatigue makes laughter softer, words looser. In sleeplessness, laughter might never soften, words never stumble. Would friendships be sharpened by clarity, or would they miss the strange intimacy that comes from being tired together, from drifting into silence in the same room? Could endless alertness make us more connected, or somehow less? Education, work, religion, family, love, each would shift, but so too would the structure of time itself. If no one needed to sleep, would the concept of day and night matter at all? Or would we invent a new kind of calendar, not built on hours of waking and resting, but on cycles of work, pause, and reflection? Maybe society would divide time into thirds, 8 hours for labor, 8 for learning, 8 for leisure. But without sleep to enforce it, who would obey? Would time dissolve into chaos, each person following their own rhythm? Or would the collective need for order still bind us to schedules? And what of silence, that forgotten partner of sleep? Would society learn to value it more fiercely, building spaces where noise and motion cease? Libraries, meditation halls, quiet gardens. Would they become as essential as water and food, sanctuaries of pause in a world that never stops? Could silence become the most precious resource of all? I wonder about art again, but not only in dreams. What would sleepless society create together? Theaters open at all hours, orchestras playing symphonies at dawn, painters filling walls with murals that stretch across entire cities. Would art expand endlessly, with more time to craft, more hours to refine? Or would art lose some of its strangeness, no longer fed by dreams? Could we trade surrealism for precision, whimsy for clarity? Would stories of sleep itself, imagined, never known, become the greatest art, the most longed for myth? And politics. Governments now rest between sessions, parliaments adjourn, leaders retreat to sleep. In sleeplessness, would power ever pause? Would debates rage without end, speeches flow without break, campaigns run with no night to interrupt them? Would that make democracy more alive, or more exhausting with no chance to breathe between decisions? Could nations burn brighter, or would they burn out? Even war would change. Now, battles halt when soldiers grow weary, strategies pause when commanders rest. Without sleep, would war stretch endlessly, a river of conflict with no night to slow it? Or would the sheer constancy of it make humanity weary in a different way, not from fatigue but from spirit? Could sleeplessness make peace harder, or more urgent? And yet, amidst all this activity, would joy survive? Or would it fade beneath the weight of too many hours? Joy now often sparkles in contrast. The joy of staying up late, of stealing hours from sleep, of waking refreshed. In a sleepless world, would joy be harder to find, because nothing is stolen, nothing is rare? Would we invent new contrasts to feel delight again? Could scarcity of pause become the new treasure, the new beauty? Perhaps, in the end, society would still discover rhythm. Not imposed by biology but chosen. Humans might create traditions of silence, laws of pause, festivals of rest. Families might invent rituals of togetherness. Lovers might craft new intimacies. Artists might dream while awake. Because maybe what society needs is not only motion but balance. Even without sleep, we might still search for the shape of its gift. And so the question remains, would a sleepless society be greater, wiser, kinder? Or would it stumble without the pause that sleep provides? Could civilization thrive without dreaming? Or would it invent new dreams, weaving silence and stillness into its endless days? What would our bond with the natural world look like if humans never needed sleep? Would we still feel the rhythm of day and night? Or would that cycle blur into something meaningless, a background pattern we no longer noticed? Right now, the body leans into light and darkness, guided by the rising and setting sun. Without sleep, would we still look to the heavens for direction? Or would time itself lose its anchor? Consider the sky. At dawn we wake, at dusk we rest. Those transitions shape our lives. But in sleeplessness, would dawn and dusk hold meaning at all? Perhaps sunrise would no longer signal beginnings, nor sunset endings, but merely colors shifting overhead. Would we still gather to watch them? Or would the beauty fade into something ordinary? Another moment in the endless current of hours? And what of the stars? They glitter now as symbols of mystery, glimpsed when most of the world is quiet. Their beauty belongs to those willing to stay awake, to sacrifice sleep for wonder. But if everyone were always awake, would the stars lose their intimacy, becoming common as daylight? Or would humanity fall even deeper in love with them, spending unbroken centuries mapping every spark, reading stories into every cluster? Could sleeplessness make us more cosmic, more aware of the universe stretching beyond us? The seasons, too, would change in meaning. Sleep now mirrors winter, a time of retreat, of stillness. Each night is like a miniature winter, each dawn a spring. Without that rhythm, would humans still feel kinship with the turning of the earth? Would winter seem less restful, less symbolic, more like an inconvenience of cold? Or would we cling to seasons even more fiercely, inventing rituals of pause during winter because we lacked nightly reminders of rest? Think of farming once again. Soil, like humans, needs rest. Fields lie fallow, replenishing themselves after harvest. If humans knew no sleep, would we still respect that truth? Or would we imagine the earth could endure endless labor, just as we did? Would sleepless humans exhaust the land more quickly, stripping forests, draining rivers, planting fields without pause until the earth itself began to fail? Or might our constant wakefulness make us more observant, more careful stewards, noticing every shift in wind and soil? Could sleeplessness give us more time to listen to nature's whispers? And animals, our companions, our symbols, our mirrors, they would still curl into nests, burrows, dens, surrendering to slumber as they always have. How would it feel to watch them, to know that every other creature yields to sleep while we never do? Would we pity them for their weakness, or envy them for their gift? Would lullabies become songs not for children, but for animals, sung by sleepless humans who longed for dreams they would never know? Imagine night in this world. Owls still glide, wolves still roam, crickets still sing. But humans, unblinking, would be there too. Would we hunt alongside nocturnal creatures, competing with them? Or would we find a deeper kinship, recognizing in their nighttime lives a reflection of what we too had become, beings who walk equally in sunlight and starlight? Could sleeplessness bring us closer to animals, or would it widen the gap between our kind and theirs? And the oceans. Right now, the sea carries its own rhythm, tides pulled by the moon, creatures rising and falling with day and night. Fishermen once rose before dawn to meet those patterns, their work guided by the balance of rest and wakefulness. But in a sleepless world, would the oceans be harvested without pause, nets cast endlessly, ships sailing at all hours? Would abundance flow, or would greed strip the waters bare? Could sleeplessness tempt us into forgetting that the sea too requires balance, that cycles matter even if we ignore them? Then there is the forest. At night, the woods feel alive in a different way, shadows stretching, sounds sharpening. Humans once feared the night, retreating to fires, imagining spirits and monsters. If sleeplessness had stripped away that retreat, would forests have been less mysterious, less sacred? Or would our constant presence there make them holier still, temples of unbroken watchfulness, where sleepless eyes witnessed every hour of the natural world? Would myths of night creatures vanish, or would they multiply, fueled by more encounters in the dark? I wonder about storms, lightning over oceans, thunder rolling through valleys, rain drumming on rooftops. Sleep now often hides them from us, hours of thunder passing unnoticed because our eyes are closed. But in sleeplessness, every storm would be witnessed, every strike of lightning counted, every flood feared or admired. Would weather feel more alive, more personal, if no moment of it ever escaped human notice? Could we learn more quickly from the sky, predicting its moods, honoring its power? Or would constant awareness dull us, turning awe into routine? And what of the cosmos beyond the sky? Sleep has always shaped the pace of exploration. Astronomers once charted the heavens in sleepless vigils, their discoveries stolen from hours others spent dreaming. In a sleepless world, every human could be an astronomer, every child a stargazer. Would our species have reached the moon centuries earlier, traveled among the planets by now? Or would the vastness of the universe overwhelm us, its endlessness mirrored in our own endless days? Consider rituals of nature. Sunrise prayers, moonlit dances, harvest festivals, all tied to cycles of waking and resting. Without sleep, would we still need them? Or would humanity create new rituals, perhaps bowing to the earth's pauses, winter's stillness, summer's abundance? Not because we mirrored them, but because we envied them? Could festivals become humanity's chosen form of sleep, moments where the species rests in celebration even if it never closes its eyes? And the question of death, how would sleeplessness shape our view of it? Sleep now acts as a rehearsal for mortality, a small surrender each night, softened by the promise of waking. Without it, would death feel harsher, more alien? Would humans, unbroken in their wakefulness, fear the final silence even more? Or would we long for it, secretly craving the rest denied us in life? Could death itself become the most sacred dream, the only true sleep a sleepless species would ever know? Perhaps sleeplessness would drive us deeper into the cosmos, searching for balance elsewhere. If the earth no longer mirrored our rhythms, would we look to other worlds for kinship? Planets with long nights, stars with cycles of flare and calm. Would space travel become less about conquest and more about longing? Longing for a place where stillness returned, where sleep was written into the sky. Could sleeplessness make us wanderers not because we wanted more, but because we missed something lost? And yet, even in this vision, I wonder, would humans still invent sleep anyway? Not through biology, but through choice. Would we lie in darkness, mimicking animals, closing our eyes to pretend? Would shamans guide visions, artists create dreamlike trances, scientists design machines to simulate the drift of unconsciousness? Would we create sleep not because we needed it, but because nature had it and we could not let it go? The earth itself seems to whisper that cycles matter. The tides, the seasons, the bloom and wither of flowers, the migration of birds. Could humanity truly escape that truth? Or would sleeplessness only make us more aware of it, longing for cycles we no longer carried in our own bodies? Perhaps we would weave those rhythms into our societies, into our art, into our rituals, so that even without sleep, we would not be lost in endless motion. And so the question lingers. Would sleeplessness make us masters of the earth, consuming it with endless energy, reshaping it to match our unbroken days? Or would it make us seekers of rhythm, more reverent toward cycles we no longer knew, more attentive to nature's pauses, because we missed them in ourselves? Maybe the greatest paradox is this, that sleepless humans might become more desperate for rest than any species that has ever lived. And in that longing, perhaps we would listen more deeply to the earth, to the sky, to the sea, because they would still carry the rhythm we had lost. What kind of machines would humans build if we never needed sleep? Would technology still be born from necessity, or would it race ahead even faster, fueled by endless hours of invention? Perhaps laboratories would glow at all times, factories would hum without pause, and cities would pulse with electricity in an unbroken stream. But would such constant motion bring brilliance, or would it create a restless spiral, inventions piling upon inventions without reflection? Consider medicine. Much of medical science has focused on sleep, curing insomnia, studying dreams, exploring how the body repairs itself at night. In a sleepless species, those branches of knowledge might never exist. Instead, what would medicine chase? Would doctors spend their time exploring how to preserve endless wakefulness, how to sharpen focus, how to stretch energy across centuries? Would health mean not only surviving but maintaining constant productivity, every moment measured by output? And yet, would sleeplessness make technology more compassionate or more demanding? Today, sleep offers a natural boundary. When the day ends, the machines rest, the emails stop, the noise quiets. Without that pause, would humans feel pressured to answer, to work, to produce at all hours? Would technology become a relentless master, never satisfied, because time itself no longer resisted? Or might it become gentler, offering artificial forms of pause, apps that remind us to breathe, machines that simulate stillness because nature no longer provides it. Think of communication. Right now, time zones matter. When one part of the world sleeps, another wakes, and messages wait across oceans until morning comes. But in a sleepless world, would communication be constant, endless, every voice always reachable? Would borders of time dissolve, creating a global hum of conversation without silence? Could humanity become closer, every culture awake at once, every message answered instantly? Or would it overwhelm us? The noise of billions of voices never quiet, the screen never dark? And transportation, how would travel change if no one ever rested? Pilots, sailors, drivers, astronauts, all currently limited by fatigue. Without sleep, journeys could stretch on without interruption, flights lasting days, ships circling the globe without pause, space missions propelled forward by crews that never dim. Would we reach distant planets sooner, colonize the stars more quickly? Or would sleeplessness make us impatient, always rushing, never willing to wait for the slow beauty of travel? Imagine factories in this world. Now, even with shifts, there are hours of quiet, machines resting, production halting. Without sleep, would factories run endlessly, products flooding the world, abundance spilling from assembly lines? Would scarcity vanish, replaced by constant creation? Or would excess become a curse, waste piling higher, the planet choked by things no one needed, simply because no one ever stopped making them? Could sleeplessness create wealth, or drown us in our own inventions? Then there is art. Technology already gives us tools to dream while awake, virtual reality, cinema, digital landscapes. If we never slept, would technology itself become our dream? Would we design machines to create visions, stories, illusions, not because we lacked time but because we lacked unconsciousness? Could artificial dreams become an industry, each person slipping into designed fantasies for balance, since nature no longer gave them? And if so, would those dreams feel sacred, more cherished than any invention of daylight? Think of artificial intelligence. Humans now build machines that never rest, algorithms that run without pause. In a sleepless world, would we still see them as separate, or would they feel like mirrors of ourselves? Perhaps humans and machines would blur together, both tireless, both ceaseless, both defined by activity without end. Would that make us feel more kinship with our creations, or more fear that we had become like them? And what of architecture? Cities now have beds, bedrooms, hotels, entire structures designed for sleep. Without it, what would buildings look like? Would apartments lose bedrooms, filled instead with studios, workshops, gathering halls? Would hotels vanish or transform into places not for sleep but for artificial dreams? Retreats where people pay for simulations of what they never knew. Could the skyline itself change, reshaped by a species that no longer closed its eyes? Imagine energy. At present, electricity demand rises and falls. Peaks in the day, softens at night. In sleeplessness, demand would never pause. Power plants would roar constantly. Solar fields would need to capture every drop of sunlight. Batteries would hum endlessly. Would this drive us toward cleaner, infinite energy, desperate to feed our constant needs? Or would it push us into scarcity, burning resources too quickly, consuming without pause? Could sleeplessness accelerate progress, or accelerate collapse? And space travel once more. Sleep is a barrier to long missions. Astronauts drifting in cramped cabins, bodies needing dreams even among the stars. Without that barrier, would we already be exploring far planets? Would ships sail without pause, crews working in endless cycles, colonies rising in the shadows of alien moons? Would sleeplessness make us cosmic nomads? Or would the stars feel emptier, without the poetry of dreams to guide us? There is also the question of boredom. Technology now fills gaps. Phones, screens, distractions to carry us through hours. But without sleep, the hours would double, the gaps grow wider. Would we create endless entertainment, simulations so rich that reality itself felt dull? Could humanity drown in its own diversions, chasing stimulation because rest no longer offered renewal? Or would sleeplessness make us more inventive, more willing to face silence, more patient with stillness because there was no escape from time? And science itself, would sleeplessness make it flourish? Laboratories open forever, researchers experimenting without fatigue, discoveries unfolding at twice the pace. Perhaps cures would come faster, theories tested more quickly, knowledge accelerating. But would speed equal depth? Or would science lose something in the rush, questions answered quickly but shallowly, progress sprinting forward without time to reflect? Could sleeplessness sharpen our minds, or scatter them? Imagine, too, the arts of memory. Without dreams to file and sort, would we need technology to do it for us? Machines that organize thoughts, devices that archive memories, apps that remind us of emotions as well as facts. Could we build external minds, not because we lacked time but because we lacked rest? Would memory become mechanical, stored in servers instead of souls? And if so, would we still feel human, or would we become more like the machines we made? There is also the thought of justice. Surveillance already stretches across cities, but night offers shadows, moments unseen. In sleeplessness, there would be no shadows unobserved, no pause in watching. Would technology make societies safer, every corner lit, every face known? Or would it steal freedom, a world of constant visibility, no darkness to hide in, no pause in scrutiny? Could sleeplessness turn technology into a cage as much as a tool? And then there is longing. Even in a world of constant invention, would humans miss what they never had? Would they long for dreams, for surrender, for the unknown land of sleep? Could technology step in not to erase sleep but to create it? Artificial dreams sold like treasures, virtual slumber treated as art. Would people lie in pods not to survive, but to feel what animals and ancestors once knew? Could sleep itself become the most advanced technology of all, recreated because we could not live without it? The paradox grows sharper the longer one imagines. Sleeplessness might speed invention, deepen exploration, expand communication. Yet it might also demand replacements, machines to simulate pause, devices to mimic memory, technologies to create dreams. Perhaps sleeplessness would not make us free, but make us more dependent, chained to the very tools we created to replace what evolution withheld. And so the question hangs, unanswered. Would sleepless humans become masters of technology, or servants to it? Would endless wakefulness make us gods of invention, or exiles from the most ancient gift of all, rest? Perhaps the future itself would depend not on sleeplessness, but on how deeply we remembered what it meant to pause. What would loneliness feel like in a world without sleep? Would it disappear, since there would always be someone awake, or would it deepen, because togetherness would never pause enough to feel special? Loneliness now often comes in the night, when others dream and silence grows heavy. But if no one ever turned away into slumber, would that silence vanish? Or would the constant noise make us feel more isolated than ever? Perhaps sleeplessness would strip loneliness of its edges. You would never be the only one awake at 3 a.m., never the solitary figure in a quiet house while the rest of the world drifts elsewhere. Someone somewhere would always be ready to talk, to answer, to share. But would that comfort last? Or would it dull over time? If companionship is always available, does it still soothe the heart? Or does it become like background music, heard but no longer felt? And what of intimacy? Much of it now is tied to rest, the act of falling asleep beside another, the trust of closing your eyes in someone's presence, the shared ritual of drifting into unconsciousness together. If sleep vanished, how would intimacy reshape itself? Would it become endless conversation, lovers walking through night streets without end? Would vulnerability be measured not by sleep but by silence, by the willingness to rest your mind in another's company even while awake? Or would something softer be lost, the wordless closeness that comes only in surrender? Meaning itself might shift. Now days feel shaped by beginnings and endings, waking, working, resting, dreaming. Without that rhythm, would life feel less like a story and more like an unbroken stream? Would meaning dissolve without chapters, or would we invent new ones? Perhaps we would create pauses of our own. Rituals, celebrations, intentional stillness to mark transitions. Could a sleepless humanity survive without writing its own punctuation into the endless sentence of time? An identity, how would it change? So often we define ourselves by the cycles of our days. Morning people, night owls, insomniacs, dreamers. If everyone were always awake, those identities would vanish. Would new ones rise? Would people define themselves by chosen rhythms, some preferring quiet hours under the moon, others thriving in the blaze of noon? Would culture split into tribes of light and shadow, not because of need, but because of choice? I wonder about art again. Dreams feed art, shaping visions stranger than waking life. Without them, would art grow thinner, more practical? Or would sleeplessness itself become the subject, artists wrestling with the emptiness of unbroken time, painting endless clocks, writing poems about longing for pause? Could humanity's greatest art be about what it lacked? A search for sleep in colors and words? Grief, too, would be different. Dreams often bring the dead back, fleeting visits that soften loss. Without sleep, those reunions would vanish. Would grief grow harsher, more final? Or would sleepless humans invent rituals of memory? Night-long vigils, storytelling marathons, gatherings to speak names until the ache eased? Could we build our own dreamscapes in community, replacing the private bomb of sleep with collective remembrance? And joy, would it survive unbroken time? Now, joy often sparkles because it interrupts routine, bursts through fatigue, surprises us. In sleeplessness, with no boundaries, would joy dull, spread too thin across endless hours? Or would new forms of joy emerge? Joy in silence, joy in pause, joy in the rare moments when someone chooses stillness even though they do not need it? Could joy become rarer, more precious, precisely because life never forces us to stop? Fear might change as well. Nightmares train us, rehearse dangers, let us face shadows in safety. Without them, would we lose something essential? Would sleepless humans be braver, unhaunted by visions? Or more reckless, unprepared for fear because they never practiced it in dreams? Could sleeplessness make us stronger, or strip away one of our oldest teachers? And then hope. Dreams sometimes give us symbols of longing, glimpses of futures not yet real. Without them, where would hope live? Would it grow smaller, confined to logic, or larger, woven into waking imagination? Perhaps sleepless humans would dream with open eyes, creating myths and visions in daylight, building their hopes not in unconsciousness but in conscious invention. Could that make hope sturdier, or would it rob it of mystery? What would solitude mean in a sleepless existence? Now, solitude often arrives when others rest, when night offers quiet hours to think. Without that, solitude would have to be chosen, carved out intentionally. Would it become more sacred, more difficult, a kind of luxury? Would humans build sanctuaries of solitude? Quiet gardens, soundless rooms, deserts where no voices reach? Not because of sleep, but because of longing for silence? And what of madness? Without sleep, without dreams, would the mind hold steady, or would it fray in subtler ways? Sleepless humans might not hallucinate, but might they lose depth, becoming restless, shallow, unable to pause long enough to reflect? Would meaning itself fray, life becoming a blur of endless hours without anchor? Could sleeplessness breed brilliance, or emptiness? Perhaps sleeplessness would force us to invent new kinds of rest, not unconsciousness, but rituals that mimic its spirit. Meditation, stillness, daydreams. Hours spent lying in the dark, not because the body demanded it, but because the soul did. Would such rituals become as important as food and water? Could they shape culture, guiding art, law, and love? And the question of death returns. Now, death feels softened by the rehearsal of sleep. Without that rehearsal, would it terrify us more, or would it feel almost welcome? A final pause after an eternity of waking? Would sleepless humans see death as tragedy, or as the only true rest? Could it become not feared, but longed for? Imagine conversations in this world. They would never be interrupted by yawns, never cut short by drowsiness. Words could flow endlessly, nights stretching into days, ideas circling without end. Would that deepen understanding or smother it? Could we truly listen without silence? Would endless dialogue create wisdom or noise? Even community itself might transform. Right now, communities gather around rhythms. Markets in the morning, feasts at night, rest on weekends. In sleeplessness, would those rhythms vanish, or would we invent new ones? Perhaps communities would choose cycles not for necessity but for meaning, agreeing to pause together, to celebrate together, to create stillness in unison. Could community survive without rhythm, or is rhythm the very thing that binds us? And so the heart of the question beats louder. If humans never needed sleep, would we still long for it? Would loneliness, intimacy, meaning, and identity bend toward creating its shadow? Perhaps sleeplessness would not erase the essence of sleep at all. Perhaps it would make us chase it harder, building it in rituals, in art, in silence, in love. Because maybe sleep is not only a biological act. Maybe it is a shape of the soul, a reminder that even in endless wakefulness, we still crave pause, still yearn for dreams, still need to surrender. And even if sleepless humans never closed their eyes, perhaps they would spend eternity trying to remember what it might feel like if they could. What would the soul become in a world without sleep? Would it still find room to stretch, to wander, to touch mysteries beyond reason? Or would wakefulness tether it too tightly to the ground, binding it in the weight of constant consciousness? Dreams have long been seen as windows into the spirit, glimpses of something greater than the waking mind. Without them, would we lose touch with the unseen, or would we discover new pathways into the infinite? Religion has often compared sleep to death and dreams to prophecy. In countless traditions, visions in the night carried messages, warnings, revelations. If sleep had never been part of human life, would those stories exist? Would prophets find their wisdom in silence instead, entering trances in daylight, stilling their breath until visions came? Could rituals of sleepless humanity become attempts to mimic what animals still carried in their slumber? A sacred drifting, a surrender to something larger than oneself? And what of morality? Would sleeplessness sharpen it, giving us endless hours to think about choices, to refine our principles, to weigh the consequences of every action? Or would the absence of pause make us careless, our ethics blurred by the ceaseless rush of hours? Perhaps sleep acts as a quiet mirror, a space where guilt softens, forgiveness grows, and perspective shifts. Without it, would remorse cling harder, or would reflection grow thinner? Could sleepless humans still learn the lessons of compassion, or would they need new ways to step outside themselves? Purpose, too, would be reshaped. Now, much of life's meaning is tied to cycles. Morning to evening, effort to rest, striving to renewal. Without that contrast, what would purpose look like? Would it stretch endlessly, a goal pursued without pause? Or would it dissolve into monotony, endless action losing its shape? Perhaps sleeplessness would force humanity to invent new meanings. Ritual pauses, sacred hours of reflection, chosen rather than required. Could purpose survive without endings, or does the soul require darkness to understand light? Imagine prayer in this world. Many people pray before sleep, surrendering worries, seeking peace. Without sleep, would prayer shift into another form? Midday meditations, midnight silences, chosen pauses not to invite rest but to invite stillness? Would temples and churches become sanctuaries of quiet, offering the pause nature had denied? Or would sleeplessness pull humanity away from prayer, consumed instead by endless work, endless talk, endless distraction? Could faith survive without dreams? And what of transcendence? Sleep now allows us to leave ourselves, to dissolve for hours into a state where time loses meaning. Without it, would humans still long for that dissolution? Perhaps rituals of transcendence would grow stronger. Fasting, chanting, ecstatic dance, meditation, all ways to reach beyond constant wakefulness. Would sleepless humans become more spiritual, chasing the mystery of surrender they never knew? Or less spiritual, so bound to waking logic that the soul's whispers grew faint? The question of mortality grows sharper here. Sleep is a rehearsal for death, a daily letting go. Without it, would death feel more sudden, more foreign? a rupture with no echo in life? Or would sleeplessness make death more alluring, the one true rest after centuries of wakefulness? Would a sleepless species fear death more deeply, or welcome it more tenderly? Perhaps sleeplessness would make death sacred, the only dream left, the one passage into stillness. Think of philosophy. Great thinkers often wrote of dreams, of the unconscious, of night visions shaping knowledge. If humans had never known sleep, what would philosophy look like? Would it turn instead to the paradox of endlessness? How to find meaning in time that never breaks? How to create depth in a life with no pauses? Would philosophers argue about the necessity of silence, about the invention of pause, about how to balance infinity with finitude? Could sleeplessness birth entirely new philosophies, not about dreams but about the hunger for them? And what of art as philosophy? In our world, art often explores the dreamlike, the surreal, the mysterious. Without sleep, art might become philosophy's partner, carrying the longing for what was never known. Painters might create endless visions of imagined slumber. Writers might invent myths of dreamlands, poems of shadows and stillness. Could art itself become the religion of sleepless humanity, the sacred vessel for longing? There is also the question of morality shaped by pause. Sleep humbles us. No matter our wealth, power, or pride, each night we surrender, helpless, vulnerable. Without it, would humanity lose that humility? Would sleeplessness breed arrogance, the belief that we are unstoppable, tireless, unbreakable? Or would we invent other ways to be humbled? Ritual fasts, intentional stillness, practices designed to remind us of our fragility? Could sleeplessness tilt us toward hubris, or toward new humility? And then time itself. Philosophy and spirituality alike treat time as sacred, carved by cycles. Without sleep, time would stretch endlessly, unbroken. Would it feel like eternity, or like imprisonment? Would sleepless humans embrace time as infinite, or despair at its weight? Perhaps sleeplessness would make us more aware of eternity, forcing us to face infinity every day, without the relief of forgetting. Could sleeplessness awaken us to cosmic truths, or drown us in their enormity? Consider ritual death. Many cultures practice symbolic deaths, initiations, ceremonies where the old self is shed, the new self born. Perhaps sleepless humans would cling to such rituals more fiercely, because they lacked nightly rehearsal for mortality. Could every culture invent ways to sleep symbolically, lying in darkness, entering trance, surrendering to silence, so the soul might practice what the body never knew? And what of silence itself? In sleeplessness, noise would never stop, society always humming. Would silence then become sacred, the truest form of worship? Would temples enforce hours of quiet, whole cities pausing to honor the absence of sound? Could silence replace sleep as the soul's renewal, the place where humanity met the infinite? Perhaps sleeplessness would drive us deeper into mystery, not further away. Perhaps without dreams, we would invent myths of them, stories of imagined slumber, legends of people who closed their eyes and entered other worlds. Could sleep become a heaven, a paradise longed for, a symbol of transcendence itself? Might religions preach of sleep as an afterlife, the eternal rest waiting beyond death? Could sleeplessness make the soul ache for sleep as it now aches for eternity? And doesn't that thought linger? That even if sleep never existed, we might still invent it as myth, as philosophy, as spirituality. Perhaps sleepless humans would live their entire lives longing for something they never needed, never had, never knew, and in that longing, find the shape of the soul itself. So the question stands, would sleeplessness strip us of the sacred, or sharpen it? Would we forget mystery, or ache for it so deeply that we invented new ways to touch it? Perhaps the soul cannot live without pause. Perhaps sleeplessness would not erase the sacred but make it stronger, more necessary, more desired. And maybe that is the paradox, that in a world without sleep, humanity might discover spirituality more fiercely than ever, chasing stillness, silence, surrender, because the body would no longer give it, and the soul would not let it go. What would it mean to live in a world where the days never ended? Would time itself become softer, less like a line with pauses and more like an endless ocean, stretching without beginning or closure. Perhaps sleeplessness would make life feel infinite, yet also strangely fragile, because without pause every moment would blur into the next. Could meaning survive in such continuity, or does it depend on the rhythm of stopping and starting again? Think of how stories are told. Every tale has chapters, pauses, endings that prepare us for new beginnings. But a sleepless life would have no natural chapters, only an unbroken flow. Would humans still write stories in the same way, or would narratives grow endless too, sprawling without conclusion, mirroring their lives? Could art reflect continuity so vast that beginnings and endings no longer mattered? Or would the hunger for closure make us invent stories even more fiercely, carving endings where life gave us none? And love, what shape would it take in such an existence? Without sleep, there would be no whispered goodnights, no mornings shared after dreams, no comfort of drifting away in another's arms. Would love lose some of its tenderness, or would it discover new ways of showing trust? Silent hours together, not asleep but choosing stillness anyway? Could intimacy survive without surrender, or would humanity create new rituals of closeness to replace what sleep once gave? Children, too, would grow differently. They would not curl into naps, not fight against bedtime, not drift into dreams that help them make sense of the world. How would they learn patience, if never slowed by weariness? How would they learn wonder, if never gifted the surreal images of dreams? Would childhood be brighter, faster, louder, or would it lose something mysterious, the quiet moments of drifting that shape imagination? And aging, how would it feel if time never paused? Sleep now softens the passing of years, dividing life into countless nights and mornings. Without it, would age feel harsher, more abrupt, like a straight road without rest stops? Or would sleeplessness make us feel younger, fuller, more alive, because we never surrendered hours to unconsciousness? Could unbroken wakefulness stretch life longer, or would it only reveal how swiftly it slips away? Imagine work in this world. It would never pause unless humans forced it to. Factories, offices, fields, always alive, always producing. Would prosperity bloom, or would exhaustion of spirit set in, not from the body but from the soul? Would we build laws not to protect sleep, but to protect silence, pauses, balance? Could society survive without rhythm, or would it collapse under the weight of endless motion? And what of art when dreams no longer fed it? Would it lose the strangeness, the surreal beauty borrowed from the unconscious? Or would artists invent new visions, creating dreams with open eyes, painting and writing what their minds imagined in waking hours? Perhaps art would become the vessel for what sleep once gave, carrying longing, mystery, and stillness into a sleepless world. Would the greatest masterpieces be about sleep itself, its absence, its memory, its myth? Spiritual life would shift too. Without dreams, without the nightly rehearsal of mortality, would humans feel further from mystery or closer to it? Perhaps faith would deepen, chasing the silence that sleep once provided. Temples might become sanctuaries not for prayer alone, but for pause, for chosen stillness, for rituals of letting go. Would sleeplessness strip the sacred from life, or make it more essential than ever? Could humanity live without surrender, or would it create its own forms of surrender shaped by longing? And death, would it seem sharper, stranger, more final without the practice of sleep? Perhaps sleepless humans would fear it more deeply, never having rehearsed its silence. Or perhaps they would long for it, craving the rest denied in life. Could death become not an ending, but the one true gift of stillness, the final dream for a sleepless species? Would they welcome it as release, or resist it more fiercely, unwilling to lose the continuity they had always known? I wonder about silence again. In sleeplessness, noise would never fade, voices never hush, cities never dim. Would humanity learn to love silence more fiercely, building gardens of quiet, rooms of stillness, entire days of chosen hush? Could silence become the new sleep, the place where minds and souls restored themselves? Would stillness grow sacred, more precious than gold? And what of nature, Would we still feel its rhythms if we no longer mirrored them? Seasons, tides, migrations, cycles of bloom and decay, they would continue around us while we remained unbroken. Would we lose our kinship with the earth, or would we envy it more deeply, longing for the pauses it still knew? Could sleeplessness make us deaf to nature, or more reverent toward it? Perhaps technology would rush forward in this world, filling hours with endless invention. Machines built without pause, discoveries made without delay, progress doubling with every unbroken day. But would technology free us, or chain us tighter, creating simulations of sleep, artificial dreams, artificial silence, because our souls still longed for what our bodies never required? Could the future itself be shaped less by sleeplessness, and more by the hunger it left behind? And meaning, would it survive? Humans now find meaning in cycles. Morning's hope, evening's closure, dreams that connect one day to the next. Without them, life might feel like a single, unbroken stretch. Would meaning dissolve into monotony, or would humanity invent new ways to create it? Rituals of pause, chosen silences, symbolic endings? Perhaps sleeplessness would not destroy meaning, but force us to create it more deliberately. Even joy would change. Joy often bursts against the backdrop of fatigue, the surprise of energy, the gift of renewal. Without sleep, joy might spread thin, less sparkling because nothing interrupts it. Or perhaps joy would grow deeper, found not in contrast but in presence, in the small wonders that do not require rest to shine. Could sleeplessness strip life of delight, or could it teach us to find delight in everything, always, without waiting for pause? And so the questions spiral. Would sleeplessness make us wiser, or more restless? Stronger, or more fragile? Closer to the stars, or further from our own souls? Perhaps it would give us endless hours, endless work, endless creation, but also endless longing for what was lost. Maybe sleeplessness would not erase the essence of sleep at all. Maybe it would only make us crave it more. Because what is sleep if not surrender? What is dreaming if not the reminder that we are more than waking minds, more than endless activity? Without it, humanity might search forever for substitutes: silence, art, ritual, technology, each one an echo of what they never had. Perhaps sleeplessness would teach us that some gifts cannot be replaced, that stillness itself is a kind of wisdom. So the final question remains: would a world without sleep be richer, brighter, more advanced? Or would it be emptier, thinner, missing the very thing that makes us human? Perhaps the greatest paradox is that in imagining sleeplessness, we begin to see sleep not as weakness, but as strength. Not as lost time, but as the secret rhythm that gives life its shape. And maybe that is the answer, that sleeplessness might build empires, but sleep builds humanity. That sleeplessness might stretch hours, but sleep stretches meaning. That without it we might gain the stars, but lose the soul.